All right, welcome everyone. This is episode 2 of many to come of the Elite Business Success Podcast. I'm Bob Sager. This is my co host, David Rosenberg, with us today. And we've got some very interesting things to go over with you today. If you guys are familiar with David, you know that he is all about sort of managing perception in the marketplace and understanding perception in the marketplace of products and services. And frankly, David, if people don't understand that, they can spend a lot of time, money, and effort and invest that, and frankly, it's wasted unless they have clarity on that. Would you agree with that statement?
No, I absolutely agree. I think a lot of times we've all heard the expression, hey, you don't want to have the tail wag the dog. Well, when you're launching a new product or service or a business or your own personal brand, you don't want to have the tail wag the dog in that either. You want to make sure that you're going for the right perceptions. And you need to learn in advance what and how you're going to be perceived. Otherwise, you can't modify and get the desired outcome that you want.
And if you guys saw or listened to our inaugural podcast episode from a week ago, you are aware that David is has put together some sort of a case study about perceptual mapping. And I don't want to steal your thunder on that, David. So I'm gonna let you go through what you've laid out here, and then as I like to do, I like to ask lots of questions because curiosity is sort of my middle name. So, so as you're going through it, I will probably have some questions for you, and hopefully they'll mirror some of the questions that the people that are listening have.
Oh, good. No, first appreciate that. So, one of the things you're not going to see today, because as Bob and I are still kind of getting our sea legs in podcasting, and with this platform we're using, you're not going to see a lot of visuals. But coming soon, after the first year, you'll see visuals, video clips. We're going to be adding all sorts of stuff. So for now, just going to have to listen. But I want you to imagine this. You are a small business and you're competing in a very crowded market. And by the luck of the universe, you have come up with a new kind of mouse. It's something, and as you can imagine, it's a very crowded market. Okay. Doesn't mean it's not possible to sell this new mouse. Well, I had a client who came up with a new product, not a mouse, but I'm going to keep referring back to this for an example. It's in a very crowded market that's been in existence for over 100 years, but they believe that their product was dramatically different. It had different materials used, different weight, different structure to it. They had already gone out the door with started putting together a marketing plan, how they were going to position it in the market. They actually started building a website for it and setting up e-commerce. They did some secondary market research using AI, said, okay, I have this, tell me everything. And what they didn't do though was test some very important areas with real people, what I call now research. So they launched a product and it didn't do very well. And they couldn't understand why. It truly was different, it truly was unique. Then they hired marketing consultants. And what we did, you can guess, we did a perceptual map. First, we did an internal, sat down with the inventor of the product. It was a product director, small business, almost $4 million, CEO, their head of marketing, their head of sales. And basically, the six of us kind of started mapping out. Started off by finding out, making sure there was alignment on what they were offering. And lo and behold, what the CEO thought was going to be launched and what the have a sales thought they were launching and a little bit of a disconnect, both in terms of the actual product being offered and what someone would get out of it from using the product. Then, then after we got fully aligned on what they believed the product actually was supposed to do, we did a check. How did they want the product to be perceived? And we listed every way they wanted the product to be perceived. Kind of like if you think about a mouse, how do you want it to be used? You want it to have that roller bar, you want all the features. So we listed everything out that the product had and then how someone would perceive it when they used it. But then we also asked, what's their ideal customer? Who's going to be using this? And surprisingly, two of the five had different ideas on who was going to be their ideal client. So as you can tell where I'm going with this is that internally there is disconnection, both in terms of how they wanted customers to receive and actually what they had to actually be perceived, right? So then we went on from there after really understanding how to be perceived, what the product is, who their ideal customer should be. We went on to now, when someone uses this product, how do you want them to feel? How should they feel? We listed everything. You know, it could be relieved or empowered or educated or however they want to feel. They want to feel good about you doing service with them. Then, after we list all this, and as you can imagine, this was a good brains, kind of a brain session. And one of the things I was thinking about, Bob, as I went back to your book, 101 freaking brilliant ideas, and started thinking about different ways to ideate how you want people to feel, what the product should look like, all this stuff. And I started bringing stuff that in. So, little plug for you there. But then, lastly, what is it that you as a company have to offer that no one else does? And what does the new product has that nothing else has out there? And sadly, this is where they had the biggest disconnect. They were all over the place. So what this internal perceptual map does is it also is a brand alignment. So we can pull everything in. So at least we're on the same page before we go out and do what I call the external perceptual map or the now research, guys. So we have this in hand. Before I go on to the next section, do you have any questions specific around this?
Yeah, actually, I do.
Good.
It's it's you often hear it said that sales and marketing are at odds like
Adversarial.
this.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And has it been your experience that through this process they're a little bit more aligned and less adversarial?
Yes. And you actually bring up a really good point because if internal mapping is done correctly and someone takes the full time, because it's about a 3 to 4 hour meeting, you should have three huge takeaways. The first is that you know exactly who you, if you could list everything that you want in your ideal client, everyone's aligned on that. But it's important to know that when we do the research out, you might learn that that shouldn't be. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing you learn is where there are gaps in training. So if the sales leadership is off base with what marketing and the CEO wanted, that's a gap. Once you're aligned, you can bet that the entire downline of the sales force needs to be trained on what everyone has just agreed to. And then the third and probably most important is really being sure that you know and are able to communicate what separates you, what differentiates you, what's, as we say, if you're in the United States, we say, what's your secret sauce? What's that secret ingredient that nobody else has?
Very interesting. And it's you've got extensive experience working with different size companies, different types of products. And how often do you find that internally people are in different departments are misaligned.
Sadly, whether it was a startup that's private equity funded and there's a disconnect with from the investors to the people in the company, all the way to not long ago a multi-billion-dollar biotech company, their head, their entire head of marketing for North America was completely disconnected from what the product management team thought. So it happens a lot.
Mm, interesting. So what? So talk about now the next step in that process, which is your consumer perceptual mapping.
So, depending upon the market size, you really want to try to get at least 20 live discussions. Now, you can do this a variety of different ways, depending upon if it's a product. I like to do focus groups. I like to keep my focus groups small, only maybe 8, but you have to have 20 responses for it to have any statistical legs, so to speak. So I did 3 8-person focus groups, brought in 8 people into the room with a sample, several samples of the invention. And we asked questions from, without touching it, what's your first impression? And everything's recorded and it's always all over the place. You get 24 different answers, or you have 3 or 4 that are the same but not quite. But then you start seeing trends like, okay, wow, this is really heavy, or wow, this let's say it's a pen, it didn't write as smoothly as I expected, or things like that. And the questions are so much, and one of the reasons why we like to do this live is because we can see how people's body language is immediately to the question, especially if you ask something that makes them uncomfortable, which usually stems around price, or you ask them something that could make them uncomfortable is if you say, okay, based on what you're hearing, how many would you buy? And people don't like usually hear that. So they suddenly go like this or whatever. But then that allows someone like me, one of the facilitators, to go and say, I noticed I just pushed you. What made you uncomfortable about that? Things that you can't get through chat GPT or any AI or doing secondary research, only live in person, what we call now research. So we ask all kinds of questions about the person in advance. Hey, what kind of car do you drive? I drive a Toyota. I drive a Mazda. I drive a what? Why do you drive that? Well, because I really like Toyota's reliability, or I love the speed of my Mazda, or whatever those answers are. And we collect all this stuff. The reason why we're collecting this is it gives us a snapshot into who you should be marketing to based on what your product attributes are going to be, or are, or should be, or whatever we gain. But you also learn what type of communication style resonates. Like if I hear of 8 people, 3 people are driving Toyotas, 2 are driving Lexus, that's really kind of the Toyota. That's 50% of just that one group is going to respond to a different type of language than the other 50%. We also ask them questions around, where do you shop if it's local and there's 3 grocery stores, higher end, middle, and lower end. You can ask like Aldi or Kroger or Publix or whatever. We find out where they shop and why. Well, Publix is such a comfortable place to shop, or Kroger, I get 2 for 1 coupons, whatever the answers are. But gain more information than you could imagine. We ask literally dozens of questions before we even get to the product stuff. Some of it's done on a questionnaire prior to them coming, but that's still qualitative research. But most are done interactively, having conversations. When I
And
start talking about, oh, sorry.
do you mind if I interrupt with a question?
No, not at all.
Okay, so how do you go about finding these 3 groups of 8 people for your focus groups?
Recruitment. And that's kind of our secret sauce. So, not going to share the exact how, but I will share a couple things here. One of the most time consuming things is the actual interview prep. When people always push back and say, oh, why does it take so long? Well, to recruit, for example, I did a recent project where they wanted college students between 18 and 22. So I went to colleges with my team and did on spot interviews one on one, and they're 45 minutes apiece, but you got to be willing to pay and you got to be willing. So there's one recruitment is being on site recruitment. For something like this, we can actually we use Facebook Marketplace, we can use LinkedIn ads or Instagram ads or Google ads, and we've never had a problem being able to get people. What I say in the ads is the secret sauce that I'm not ready to share. But the reality is getting people is never a problem. Getting people in under 3 weeks, that's a little bit of a challenge. So, for example, external perceptual mapping, I always tell just for the external parts, going to take up to a month. That allows us to
Gotcha.
do all this, the secondary research as well as the primary, getting everybody recruited. We also have to get space for meeting rooms. We want to be able to record, and that's something else too. We will not supply you with any of the recording or the names of any participants. We will not supply you with any transcript of the recording either. That is all part of the proprietary process. What you will get is a detailed analysis of what was heard and seen and recommendations based on that analysis. So, back to the group. In all three of those groups, we ask very specific questions about the product. How much? What do you think about the weight? What do you think about the color? What do you think about the action? What do you think about the materials used? What would you change? What didn't you expect? What were you expecting that you didn't see? What? Give me three pros. Give me three. We go down a whole list until we get more information about a prospective product than you could ever imagine. But the takeaways are, what materials to use, the weight. If it's something that's mechanical, you'll know the torque. I mean, you'll learn everything. So then I can go back to the company and see where the gaps are. Here's what we made. They don't like this, this, but they love this, and this. Did we not pay enough attention? Do we have to go back and do another scrum or ideation and redo a product to make for improvements? Or do we launch it as is, and then the enhancement, a product enhancement or a line extension, implements all the improvements? These are all things that come into play when we start doing, from perceptual mapping, we do what's called probability of success analysis. Again, it's another proprietary method of scoring. And we'll come back. And if I'm being very transparent, if you are at 50% or higher, we always recommend go for it. Because in today's society, you don't know what's going to go viral or when. And even something that, quote, has a 50% chance, that's better than betting on a racehorse. It's better than, most football games. But if you got 70% chance plus, you might have a real hit on your hand. And that's been my experience, certainly in the biotech, consumer packaged goods, and like some other consumables. When we do a model and it ends up being 70 or 80% chance of success, it usually explodes in growth.
Well, David, it sounds like you certainly will know if you have at least a minimally viable product, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so you can feel very confident in going to market with that.
I think so. I mean, the whole idea of perceptual mapping, it's interesting. Everything about marketing should be to give your product, service, person, brand, whatever, the best chance of success. Perceptual mapping helps you understand who your client should be versus who you were hoping, or maybe there's a match. That's what we're going to find out. It tells you areas that you should be going into versus areas you might have thought made sense. This because everyone focuses so much on secondary research, but the secondary research is everything that has already happened, and then they project behavior. I know for me and the clients I've worked with, projection behavior is good. It's great data and information, but it almost never marries to the now data. What's happening now? What do they think now? What are they going to do next? Putting those two together allows us a much better funnel into what really is going to happen and set you up for the best chance of having a successful product, service, brand.
And that's really all you can ask for,
Mhm.
in an ever changing marketplace. Um,
Exactly.
you can't use there are no guarantees. Um,
There isn't, but who wouldn't want to have the best chance of success? One of the things I see, like
oh
on
yes,
LinkedIn or on Instagram, all the times they're always talking about, "Hey, I've got this wonderful new drink. It's amazing," and they're throwing it out to the masses. But what they haven't checked is, okay, so what temperature should the drink be, and is who's it wonderful for? They don't. They always focus on telling a story, which I absolutely agree with, but what if you're not telling the right story? You're just telling a product story, a brand story. Like with my case study, and I kind of made it very vague, but the bottom line was we found out that the product that they actually had made wasn't the right product for the market. It wasn't the right material, and they were going to price it way too low. If they tweaked, made it with different material, they could price it as a premium and people were willing to pay for it, at least the 24 that we went into. And they even gave us specific price ranges, which all of them were higher than what the original. This you cannot get from AI, you can't get from secondary research. That's why it's important to grab all the data, all the perceptual mapping, so you again have the best chance of success.
yeah,
Everything in ideation. I mean, one of your core competencies is ideation, coming up with ideas. Well, do you stand in front of a room? I know the answer, and just say, "Here's what I think," and then you say, "We're going to do this idea, this idea, this." Now, what do you think?
yeah.
Said no,
Well,
yeah, no. You
of
you
course
get
not.
get you actually do. You don't call it perceptual mapping, but that is what ideation is in a big crowd.
Yeah, it's you know, one of the things I love about business, David, is, and I'm a total business nerd. Um, it's it's so much about serving people in the way that they want to be served,
Yeah.
and whether that's through a product, whether it's through a service, um, whether it's through a process around a product or service, that's so important. And and I love competition. That's to me competition. I mean, you've heard this said, I'm sure, a bunch of times. It makes all of us better. It's iron sharpening iron, and I just love it. But and that's a good. Do you have anything else? We're about 7 minutes left, and I've got a little bit of stuff I'd like to go over about goal setting since we're near
Oh,
the end of 2024.
absolutely. I do just want to, I'd like to call out somebody that made a very big impression on me. I've had the opportunity to have multiple podcasts or be guests, sorry, on podcasts, and I've had chances of one on one meetings. And someone really jumped out who's offering something very unique on LinkedIn, and that's some very specialized legal services. Her name's Ishika Agarwal, and I just want to give her a quick shout out. Really enjoyed our discussion earlier today. And, Bob and I may shout out people inadvertently as we come into contact, but it's someone, anyone watching or listening today should look her up. She's really something very unique and very special. So I just wanted to give her a quick shout out. And I think it's a perfect segue into what you're talking about with business strategy.
Yeah, that's going into 2025. One of the things that I have found, and this is true of some companies, especially smaller companies. It's almost always true of individuals, in that they should already have their goals in place for
Mm.
2025, but that doesn't mean that they do. I remember years ago going to a kickoff meeting, a beginning of year kickoff meeting, and it was at the end of January. And I remember thinking, there's already a month gone. 1/12 of the year is gone, and we're going and we're having a kickoff meeting now. It just didn't make any sense to me. So I hope that if you're, especially if you're listening to this live or if you're catching the replay before the beginning of 2025, I hope that you already have your 2025 planning in place. And so this really applies a little bit more to individuals, but as a company, if you're running an organization, I want you to share this with the people in your company, especially your sales team, especially your marketing team. And that is one of the, I think, the biggest missing ingredient in accomplishing goals. Um, and the ingredient is a lack of belief that going to be able to accomplish those goals.
Oh,
And
yes.
and let me tell you what I have found is you referred to secret sauce before, David. This is secret sauce about goal accomplishment, and
Okay,
that
guys, pay
is
attention. We're getting some secret sauce, folks. Pay
oh,
attention.
this is worth the price of admission right here. I
I'm
promise.
ready.
So when the problem that most people run into in accomplishing their goals is when in their daily review, which if you don't have your goals written down, that's a secret right there. You got to write them down. That's the first step to putting them in the real world. A mentor of mine said everything that's great that's ever built is built three times. First, it's built in your mind, then it's built on paper, and then it's built physically. And
I love
so
that.
those are the three keys right there. But first, you've got to build it in your mind, and you've got to build it in your mind in a way that it feels real already. And so here's the secret sauce. Everybody has won something in their lifetime. It might be a difficult board game that you were playing, it might be a race on the playground when you were in the seventh grade, right? Whatever that feeling that you got, that feeling, and I'm not talking about, if you added 2 plus 2, you don't get that feeling, right? The more difficult the accomplishment was, the more you get this, what I call that winning feeling. And so think back to a time where you had a perfect 10 result. And that generally comes from having won something, right? And that feeling, that winning feeling, that perfect 10 result feeling that goes along with that, when you think about your goals, when you review your written down goals and contemplate on them, you want to merge your goals with that feeling. And I'll tell you the problem that people have, and this is the reason most people don't accomplish most of their goals, is that every time they think about their goals, especially if it's a goal that they're not 100% sure how they're going to accomplish, a feeling of doubt creeps into their mind
Mhm.
because they go, well, I've never done this before. So I don't really know how I'm going to do it. And that little seed of doubt gets planted in your subconscious and it grows. And then every time you review your goals, that doubt creeps up again. And doubt is one of uh, it's one of the what I call the six devils of limitation. And if anybody has ever seen me, I've shared this a number of times on LinkedIn, but the six are fear, doubt, discouragement, conflict, greed, and envy. And doubt is a big one. And fear can be overcome by desire. But when you're setting your goals, they should be goals that are something you truly desire, not something that somebody else wants you to want, right?
Mhm.
Not what your boss wants you to want, right?
Mhm.
This is to me one of the big disconnects in sales forces out there is that your boss sets goals for you, but they may or may not have any relevance to what you want to accomplish as a salesperson or a sales manager,
Exactly.
right? And so I'm speaking to you as an individual salesperson or an individual business owner right now. when you write your goals down, make sure that they are your goals and make sure every time that you review them, you merge them with that feeling, that winning perfect 10 feeling.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I think the universe, or whatever you believe above us, made made winning feel good for a reason, right?
Yes.
It's to keep us going forward. But one of the things about perception management, which is something that I really feel strongly about, is that everyone needs to start with the desired outcome, the goals that you were just talking about. Everyone needs to add what you just said, the secret sauce of what it feels like as you achieve those goals. Too many people focus on the how
Mm,
before
amen
they
to that.
finish focusing on the what. Because I'll tell you this, if your desired outcome is to be, I don't know, is to lose 30 pounds or make $100,000 or win a marathon, if your desired outcome is one of those or any number of things, and that's the only outcome you're willing to accept, how doesn't matter. Your brain will find a way to get there.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been doing, David, is people can subscribe to a mail list. They're getting the entire text of all three of my currently published books, one chapter at a time, once a week, so that they can contemplate on it, get the most value out of it. And I thought about goal setting because the first book is about personal achievement. It's called Discovering Your Greatness, and I think it was segment 7 went out. It goes out every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time, and so really thought about that. I knew that was going to go out this week, and I got reading back through that, and I know we got to wrap up here because we're at the end of our time. But I got reading back through that, and I said, this is really good stuff. And, and did you ever wonder? Sometimes it's like you talk about the universe, and it's like you wonder, did this come from me or just through me? Right? You gotta
I
think,
love that. And it may have come
and I
through.
think I I I sincerely believe it did.
Well, it's interesting, folks. What you heard today, what you heard in our first inaugural, what you're going to hear moving forward, you're going to continue to get examples and stories. And, we're hoping to do a couple of things. You hear Bob and I, particularly Bob, talk about legacy. What are we leaving? How can we serve you more? And we believe this podcast can really help out in a lot of different ways. And we're so glad you spent 30 minutes of letting us invade your space today. And we look forward to coming back next Monday and doing it all again. And who knows, maybe I can talk Bob into doing stuff on ideation next Monday. What do y'all think? Think I can
I
get you to
think
do that, Bob?
I think there's a good chance, David.
All right. Until then, everyone have a wonderful week. Do not delay your joy. Thank you so much.